Wow, I'm getting behind with this diary of what's going on every day in 1945. But anyway, here is the 11th of April.
Breakfast was porridge with a squeeze of syrup. Lunch was vegetable pasties, a slice of Ovaltine cake, and a pear. Dinner was leftover stew in potato pastry with steamed greens and cauliflower. Every meal is washed down with lashings of tea. And now the events of the 11th of April 1945 as they unfolded, and we're sticking with food actually. Field Marshal Allenbrook notes in his diary that a representative of Henry H. Arnold, an American air chief, came to see him and brought me a present of bananas, oranges, and apples, a very kind thought. These days, a box of fruit doesn't seem like much, but oranges and bananas were virtually unheard of in wartime Britain. The Allied armies were still advancing, and Patton's Third Army broke loose from Coburg, bypassed Erfurt, Weimar, Jena, and Gera, crossed the Mulde River, and continued 80 miles or so. Bypassed towns fell to follow-up infantry, with Weimar being taken on the 11th. At 3:15 p.m., the first elements of Third Army arrived at Buchenwald concentration camp. Opened in 1937 and eventually having 139 sub-camps, Buchenwald was one of the first and largest concentration camps inside Germany. People the Nazis considered undesirable were sent there and forced to build railways and armaments. Around 250,000 prisoners passed through Buchenwald, and many never made it out again. Lack of food, terrible conditions, and summary executions led to well over 50,000 deaths in the 8 years that it operated. However, it wasn't an extermination camp like Auschwitz. Most prisoners were worked to death rather than gassed, but some were simply shot or hung. There's also mention of torture and hideous experiments being carried out on inmates, but I won't go into too much detail. Undesirables could include homosexuals, communists, Slavs, the physically disabled, the mentally disabled, gypsies, Jews, and even regular prisoners of war. Buchenwald held 168 Allied airmen as inmates in 1944. Many of them had had contact with the resistance and were found wearing civilian clothes and no military identity. This meant they were considered spies rather than combatants bound by the Geneva Convention. 2 of the airmen succumbed to illness while in the camp. Elsewhere in Germany, the US Ninth Army reaches Magdeburg and the Elbe River and is only 60 miles from Berlin. They reckoned they could be in Berlin within 48 hours given their rate of advance. Most senior Nazis know the game is up by now, and many can't see a way out because they're in too deep. They know they'll probably be executed for war crimes, or at the very least serve long prison sentences. Alfred Mayer, Deputy Reich Minister for the occupied Eastern Territories, certainly didn't see a way out. He joined the Nazi Party in 1928, rose steadily through the ranks, and was even present at the Wannsee Conference in 1942, where the Nazis came up with the final solution to their so-called Jewish problem. Up to his neck in crimes against humanity, he took his own life, and his body was found on the 11th of April by the River Weser. Other top Nazis were still looking for ways to avoid Pierpoint's noose. Himmler, head of Hitler's personal bodyguard and architect of the Holocaust, genuinely believed the world was run by Jews. To that end, he'd ordered several Jews to be taken out from forced labour and extermination camps and put into holding camps and kept alive. The idea being to say, "Look, I'm nice, I kept them alive." On the 11th of April, he ordered that Bergen-Belsen camp be handed over without a fight. Some prisoners had recently been transported there from Auschwitz-Birkenau, along with Joseph Kramer, former commandant of Auschwitz, who would take over running Belsen. Rather than help the Nazis out, what the Allies later found at Belsen would do even more damage to their reputation, if that was possible at this point. On the other side of the world, an Australian commando unit was dropped on the island of Mushu for what could easily be the inspiration for Alistair MacLean's book The Guns of Navarone. Operation Copper, as it was known, involved 8 commandos of Z Special Unit landing on an enemy-occupied island. Their task was to reconnoitre the enemy defences, capture a prisoner for interrogation, and find the location and working state of 2 large naval guns that could threaten a planned Australian landing zone on New Guinea. Unfortunately, the mission started badly and only got worse. Most of their equipment was rendered useless after their canoes were damaged on landing. They did successfully grab a prisoner, but their cover was blown by said prisoner and a firefight broke out with various Japanese patrols. Over the next few days, all but one of the commandos were captured, killed, or otherwise missing in action. Only sapper Edgar Dennis, known as Mick, survived the ordeal. After days of being hunted, he managed to escape the island and finally met up with friendly forces on the 20th of April. The information he handed over meant that the mission wasn't a complete failure. Mick Dennis was awarded the Military Medal for his courage and passed away in 2015 at the age of 96. Back in America, President Roosevelt was still relaxing at his retreat in Georgia. This picture was taken of him on the 11th of April, and he had an appointment to have his portrait painted the following day. Thank you for watching today's episode of the Reich and Rations project. If you enjoyed today's episode, then don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. If you would like to see regular updates of what our rationing challenge entails, you can find out more by searching #VictoryRationsProject or following @TimeForHomeLife on Instagram. Good night.